When you hear the phrase the world's most successful bank robbers, what are the first images that come to mind? Probably picture something like DeNiro and his crew in Heat, right? Guys in masks, big guns, storming in, taking hostages, and doing the whole thing that bank robbers do, which is, well, rob banks. However, the group that US security officials have called the most successful bank robbers in the world aren't like that at all. They're a new kind of bank robber, and they represent an entirely different crime. We're talking about the LAZARUS Group, a hacker collective that has grown exponentially over the past decade. Even if you don't know the name, you're probably familiar with some of their work. They aren't just robbing banks, they're robbing a whole lot more, and whether you know it or not, you are being affected by their actions. So let's start from the beginning. Even though many believe they were operational before this, the first major action that can conclusively be traced to LAZARUS was Operation Troy in 2009. This large-scale instance of cyber espionage where they effectively hacked the White House, the Pentagon, the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, the Washington Post, and Amazon. You know, just a few small, insignificant organizations. Even though this was a highly successful hack, unless you ran in cybersecurity circles, you probably still hadn't heard of LAZARUS in 2009.
And now I'm about to hack your world into pieces, old man. Looks like someone was a catalog model in Japan.
Whoa, those boots!
Their big public debut in so many ways came a few years later. Much like trolls or anyone doing unsavory things online, hackers take great pains in remaining anonymous. And a group like LAZARUS will often adopt different names and aliases for new operations. In 2014, they did their most impactful action yet, and they did it under the moniker of Guardians for Peace. This was the hack of Sony Pictures, and you might remember this one. It got a whole lot of press coverage, and it makes sense why. It was a giant hack of a major motion picture studio. This led to the leak of thousands of confidential emails from top executives, producers, and actors. Many of the most scandalous of these emails were republished on Gawker, and this led to a lot of embarrassment as well as some high-profile resignations. And while the leaked emails got most of the public attention, there was another component to this hack that was far more important. They obtained 47,000 social security numbers from the Sony computer network. Though nobody knows the exact number, estimates for damages here range between $35 and $80 million. Not to mention a sucker punch to reputation. Now you might ask, why would a group that previously targeted the White House and Pentagon set their sights on a movie studio? Isn't that a bit of a step down? And the answer is simple. They wanted to stop the release of a movie.
You two are going to be in a room alone with Kim, and the CIA would love it if you could take him out.
You want us to kill the leader of North Korea?
Yes.
What? A comedy starring Seth Rogen and James Franco about the assassination of Kim Jong-un. They were willing to halt the release of this movie by any means necessary. So now, if you don't already know, you may be starting to guess who backs the LAZARUS Group, which will start to show you why their actions are absolutely wild compared to your average hacker. North Korea is one of the most notorious dictatorships in the world, and also the least understood, which is very intentional on their part. There's a reason it's known as the Hermit Kingdom. Since its founding in 1948, North Korea has been shrouded in secrecy. Almost no information escapes North Korea, and even less enters. And that's why this story is so ironic. One of the modern world's most successful hacking collectives came out of North Korea, which has no public internet and limited electricity. If you fly over the Korean peninsula at night, you'll see bright lights from both South Korea and China, with North Korea sitting in between them, a total expanse of black. In North Korea, cybercrime isn't something that just occurs in the shadows. This is a function of their government and a major source of revenue. They train their citizens to do this, and they start them young. Imagine you're growing up in America, or Finland, or France, or really any modern Western democracy. In second or third grade, it starts to look like you're getting pretty darn good at math. What happens next? Maybe your teachers tell your parents about it. Maybe they move you into some kind of gifted program. You'll surely get told about future careers that need this talent. You could become a doctor, an engineer, a computer scientist. The possibilities are really endless. Now, imagine you're growing up in North Korea, and from a young age, you showed the exact same level of mathematical talent. In some ways, the result would be very similar. You'll likely be plucked from your class and placed into a special program for highly gifted students. You'll begin to learn a much more advanced level of mathematics. Except, in this case, you already know your career path. You know what you're being trained for, to become a cyber warrior, a hacker. In North Korea, a hacker syndicate like LAZARUS does not operate outside the law. They're funded by, protected by, and working directly for the North Korean government. So you, the child prodigy, graduate from your secretive training program, and you're ready to enter the workforce. The next question is, where do you go? Because remember, North Korea has no public internet, and this is very much on purpose. The North Korean government, ever since it was founded, has taken great pains to keep their citizens in a kind of cultural bubble, surrounded by constant pings of pro-government propaganda and little to no knowledge of what life is like throughout the rest of the world. But hackers obviously need to get access to the internet. So where do they go? The answer is China. Members of Lazarus work out of locations all throughout China, often owned by Chinese businesses with ties to North Korea. Think about the cramped tech houses of Silicon Valley where companies like Facebook were founded. Except in this case, rather than building something, they're all working to steal from governments and institutions. Geniuses, all working together to steal as much as possible. This is why Lazarus is so effective and so insanely dangerous. This is a job for the best and brightest of an entire country and not an easy one. Your lifestyle as a North Korean cyber warrior is extremely demanding. You wake up at 6 a.m. sharp, you sit down at your computer, and you'll often work 10, 15, or even 20 hours straight. You work this hard because you have a quota. If you miss that quota, you could be sent back to North Korea.
But if you don't meet the quota, and the minders will make sure that they'll put enough pressure on you. And if that happens repeatedly, you will face the growing odds of being sent back home.
And that's the key here. The reason why you work so hard and remain so motivated is because as difficult as these circumstances are, you're still living a far better life than you would if you were back home. You're better fed. Even though your life is highly restricted, you still enjoy more freedom than any of your family members. You can go online, maybe watch some movies, and get some even fleeting glances at what the larger world is actually like.
Hulu, Netflix, HBO Max. I got all the accounts and passwords you need.
And this brings us to one of the biggest ironies at play here. And this is the reason this group is such a perfect symbolic example of the two sides of digital progress. As a hacker, you're working like a machine in order to steal money, cause chaos, destroy lives, and do anything you can do to strengthen North Korean dictatorship, to essentially help your life. Yet in doing so, some of these hackers can't help but also learn about the free world, about the things that they had no access to when they were growing up in North Korea. After all, the only reason we have any of this information about how Lazarus functions are through defectors, former members of the group who left North Korea never to return. In becoming hackers, in committing this large-scale cybercrime for the government, they also started seeing through the propaganda, getting an understanding that there's far more to the world than the pro-government messages that they grew up with.
On every Saturday, they have to do this propaganda session, which is basically about gathering all the hackers together into a room, and they have to recite whatever messages, whatever lines come from Pyongyang.
These are the dual sides of progress, a digital age helping to show what the outside world is actually like, while simultaneously making it much easier for a small, focused group to cause massive damage. Now that we know a little bit more about Lazarus, who they are, what they do, how they work, let's talk about some of their more recent actions, because as devastating as the Sony hack was, it could almost be seen as a rehearsal for a far more ambitious hack that Lazarus would attempt just 2 years later in 2016. This is when they attempted to steal close to $1 billion from the Bangladesh National Bank. That's billion with a B. This is a totally insane thing to do, and here's how it happened. In January 2015, they got into the Bangladesh bank system by sending out a fake CV for a fake job candidate, a pretty common trick used by hackers. As soon as someone inside the bank opened the attachment, they were in. The goal was to take $951 million that the Bangladesh National Bank had sitting in the New York Federal Reserve and transfer it out to their own accounts. After lurking in the systems for a year, they made their move in February 2016, and the timing was very intentional. This was the start of the Lunar New Year in Asia. So the plan was to steal the money and transfer it to multiple Philippine banks where there would be no one available to answer the phones thanks to that holiday. Every step of this operation was planned out meticulously. They even remotely sabotaged a printer at the Bangladesh bank that was used to print off large transactions as they happened, buying them even more time. They just thought the printer was busted, but meanwhile $1 billion was being funneled out of their system. This was an incredibly audacious thing to do, and the reason that they didn't fully succeed was a matter of total chance. As I said, the plan was to move $951 million out of the New York Fed and then spread it out across several banks in the Philippines. Well, An RCBC bank branch in Manila, where the hackers were trying to transfer some of the money, was located on Jupiter Street. And Jupiter, in total coincidence, also happened to be the name of a sanctioned Iranian shipping vessel. So that word was tagged by the New York Fed's automated computer systems. Again, this was not because they had any idea about Lazarus or North Korea, but because of a totally unrelated Iranian shipping vessel. Just plain bad luck for the Lazarus fellas. So this caused payments to be reviewed, where they were then halted. However, about $101 million still went through. This is obviously far below what they were going after, but still a significant hit for Bangladesh, a country where 1 in 5 citizens live below the poverty line. The sheer audacity of Lazarus, the fact that they would even attempt something so huge, puts them on a whole different level from most hackers. And they have this audacity because they aren't independent criminals. They are backed and totally protected by the country of North Korea. And also, North Korea really needs the money. Due to so many reasons, human rights abuse, nuclear threats, and extreme aggression towards their neighbors, North Korea has been living under crippling trade sanctions through the UN. These sanctions have devastated their GDP, and so cybercrime is now one of the country's largest sources of revenue. However, we shouldn't make it sound like this is new. North Korea has been making money illegally for many years. Back in the 90s, they were involved in counterfeiting, human trafficking, and weapons sales. North Korea even at one point was manufacturing some of the purest meth in the world.
Jesus, you got crystals in here 2 inches, 3 inches long. This is pure glass. You're a goddamn artist.
Hacking is just the latest evolution of what they've always been doing, and the money they steal goes to all sorts of functions for the government, including nukes. And sorry to be a bummer, but this is why the actions of the Lazarus Group affect us all. Because even if you've never been personally impacted by one of their operations, even if you don't care about some other country's national bank being raided, even if you've never particularly liked Seth Rogen, a nuclear North Korea is something that no one wants. In 2019, North Korea spent an estimated $620 million on their nuclear program, and you better believe that a good chunk of that came straight from Lazarus Group operations. In the last few years, Lazarus has continued to expand. A few of their more recent operations are the WannaCry hack, a global attack that was the first widespread use of a crypto worm. This new type of computer virus can spread between connected computers without anyone ever needing to open a bad link. Then they capitalize on the COVID pandemic by trying to hack into various pharmaceutical giants, trying to steal proprietary vaccine tech. Or take their recent highly successful hack of Axie Infinity, the play-to-earn game. In that case, they infiltrated Ronin, a utility connected to the game, stealing over $600 million. Lazarus is seen within North Korea as an extension of their army, and what they represent is something that military-type people call an asymmetric threat. Basically, that means a threat that's coming from a source that is seemingly much smaller and much weaker than its intended target. North Korea does not have a large army, but through the Lazarus Group, they're able to steal huge amounts of money and cause global chaos. The WannaCry hack affected the British National Health Services so deeply that they had to cancel all non-emergency procedures. Because here's the truth. We live in an extraordinary time. The increasing digitization of our world has created more positive opportunities than ever. But there's a flip side to this. The technology means a small government has the capability to undermine global institutions, stealing more money than John Dillinger had ever dreamt of. So as we continue to upgrade to new technologies, it's important to recognize both the good as well as the bad. And maybe, just maybe, take a moment before you open an email attachment from someone that you've never met.